So welcome. I thought that this would be a great case to share with you all as we also look at the integration with Rupa and with Practice Better. These are two companies that I use in my own practice, and so it felt like a really good fit to share this and to see how this all fits together. So we're going to be taking a look at a patient. This is not her real name, named Rachel. She comes in around March, so after, at least in this part of the world that I'm here in Philadelphia, that she's been kind of gone through the winter. And she's just feeling like her energy has been atrophying, that she says it takes 2 hours of coffee and a pep talk to get started in the day, that she's been having poor sleep, but she got a recommendation from her acupuncturist to start taking some vitamin D. So she has been doing that. It's been helping a little bit. Her symptoms had gotten really bad during the pandemic and hadn't improved. This case is from a couple of years ago. And so just relevant, I'm going to go through this kind of quickly, but she doesn't have any major red flags, no illness or injury, no allergies. She hasn't had a mental health diagnosis, but she has had periods where up to 3 days she's not really feeling great and can sometimes be hard to get out of bed. This had started after a bad breakup, and she attributed it to grief. All of that is worse with high stress. So she has had these moments of feeling down. She has some family history of mental health concerns like anxiety and depression. She used to do a lot of exercise, but hasn't been doing that much lately. She's felt a little out of whack with her eating. She's felt a little bit of isolation. She is not using alcohol very much, and she does see a therapist regularly. And so I wanted to hop over, since our topic is seasonal affective disorder, to know what that is. It's in fact it's just a subset of major depressive order or bipolar disorder that happens to be recurrent, that happens seasonally, and the symptoms last for about 4 or 5 months. And during the rest of the year, we don't see the symptoms. So when someone is making this diagnosis, they'll diagnose someone with major depressive disorder or bipolar disorder and specify it as with seasonal pattern. Typically, or most commonly, we see this in the winter, and that's what we're going to talk about here, but it also can happen in the summer. And so I like to look at, this is the DSM-5-TR, the most up-to-date diagnostic tool for this diagnosis. And I like to just emphasize that all these diagnoses that are made on these mental health conditions, such as seasonal affective disorder in this case, that you're meant to rule out any other cause, any other reason why this could be happening. And so I wanted to just point out that a lot of these symptoms, depressed mood, different weight changes, insomnia or sleeping more, hypersomnia, fatigue, difficult brain fog, kind of diminished ability to think or concentrate, things like that. We see these in other conditions, and we'll look into that also. Other conditions that are such as nutrient deficiencies. With fatigue, we see with vitamin D deficiency or iron deficiency. So really it's important when we're making these mental health diagnoses that we look at what are some root cause, underlying causes that could be contributing. And so here, with a seasonal pattern, is how seasonal affective disorder is diagnosed in the clinic, just to see that. Typically happens at least 2 times in the same season consecutively for the diagnosis. And then also for the winter type, we add in hypersomnolence, which is wanting to sleep a lot, carbohydrate cravings, and extreme fatigue. And here I also just want to point out from a holistic or integrative medicine perspective that in the winter also is when we want to hibernate, right? That's when the days are darker and we might have these feelings anyway. So sometimes we might want to also normalize for people that the amount of energy you have for things or your need for sleep might change also in the winter. And so here's Rachel again. I like to run a symptom score of different mental health symptoms in particular that correspond with neurotransmitter deficiencies. I've included that reference for you in the slides, so you'll have that link to see what that looks like on your own. But she came in with a lot of symptoms that could be related to low serotonin. And we'll talk a little bit about why we might see that in seasonal affective disorder in particular. And then symptoms related to low catecholamines or dopamine system. Those ones have to do with focus, attention, energy, etc. And so her score was pretty high here with 6s or 8s here. And then we had some initial tests that came in from her primary care doctor. And so we had a complete blood count that was within normal limits. We had a fasting glucose, which was within normal limits, but if we're looking at the optimal range, we have some questions or just want to keep an eye on it. Her TSH, the thyroid stimulating hormone, was within normal limits conventionally, but optimally might indicate something we would take a more of a close look at. Her hemoglobin A1C, which is that blood sugar metric, was within normal range, but also something to keep an eye on. Her ferritin, however, was quite low, even conventionally. Ferritin, of course, is the iron storage metric. So I wanted to just point out here that right away we could see for her that if she was feeling fatigue, part of that could be that her ferritin was 19. And so we started to think about how do we replete. And again, this slide will be available for you and the reference. So I'm not going to go into too much depth. But this was something initially that we wanted to look at for her that could be contributing to her symptoms. So our initial recommendation was to start with iron, continue with the vitamin D, adding in tryptophan, which is a precursor to serotonin, which we saw could be an issue for her, and then look at some other labs, and we'd follow up. About a week in, she mentioned that she was feeling more positive, not as grumpy. She wasn't needing to lie down and take a nap in the afternoon, and she was starting to get a little bit more energy in the morning. After 2 weeks, she was still doing great. She said that one day she forgot to take the tryptophan, which again is that precursor to serotonin, and felt kind of grumpy. So she took one a little bit later and felt a lot better. And then really significantly, she was able to kind of get over this hump and started to do a 20-minute exercise video, a high-intensity interval training video every other day. And so she was able to start to bring in some of these other factors that are really helpful with mood and especially with this seasonal affective disorder. So we looked at some new labs. Again, I'm kind of going through this, and you have these resources and you can always ask other questions after too. But here we looked at her TSH had increased even. We're looking at free T4, which is the inactive form of thyroid hormone, and free T3, which is the active form, and seeing that the optimal range for free T3 is actually above 3 here. So I'll change that for the slide handouts you guys get. But yeah, seeing that the thyroid hormones seem to be in a normal range, but still the TSH seems to be above an optimal range. And so we're still curious about that. And we're going to keep that in mind in terms of supporting the thyroid function. There weren't antibodies that would indicate autoimmune thyroid, and her CMP was also in range. And so here we're recommending continuing with the iron, continuing with the vitamin D, and we added in some extra support, an antioxidant that's also helpful for thyroid. So it had selenium and zinc in it, which are important for the conversion from inactive to active thyroid hormone. We continued with the tryptophan. So next, we did a follow-up lab on the ferritin, and then also took one look at this vitamin D. So vitamin D, we didn't have a comparison, but it was at 29, which even conventionally, they like to see it at least 30. And she had been for, now at this point, probably 3, 4, 5 months, been taking vitamin D at 3,000, and is still kind of below what we were thinking. So we definitely want to make sure she's still taking vitamin D. We might consider later on how well she's absorbing it. But then here we are getting to wanting to get more towards an optimal range. Her ferritin, that iron store, is increasing, but we definitely want to get it to continue to increase so she can still get benefit from it. So here we are adding first thing in the morning. So we're also interested at this point to see how she would be doing to help her dopamine pathways. So we added tyrosine 500 milligrams first thing in the morning, 30 minutes before coffee and food. And with breakfast, we added in an extra tab of iron just to kind of continue supporting that, and then increasing her vitamin D as well. We separated the ACEs and zinc to lunch because iron and zinc sometimes can compete for absorption. So we want to separate those. And then continued with tryptophan mid-afternoon. And then we'd follow up with her 3 months from the initial visit. So at the 12-week follow-up, so this went in June. So again, as we're talking about seasonally, this is also a different time of year. But with this intervention, she said that overall, I feel like I have so much more energy. There's a huge part of what was so hard, the root problem. So she was exhausted. I was exhausted and tired. The biggest shifter, she said, was the iron. Also, I think the other things were important, and she's still doing them. She said when she added the ACEs and zinc, she's noticed a pretty immediate shift in my metabolism. Early on, the aminos such as tryptophan and then with tyrosine were helping with mood. She no longer felt like she needed coffee in the morning, but she still wanted it, which is very fair. And so we do this comparison at 12 weeks, which is the 3-month mark, looking at those initial ratings for serotonin deficiency symptoms. She went basically the spoiler, the punchline is that she went from having a score of 36 to having a score of 0. She really was feeling great in her mood at this point. And then looking at the dopamine system, she showed improvement here. And sorry, I need to do the total, but you can see that the scores improved on all fronts here from here. So additional recommendations, we have the adding in a B complex at this point, because we started to talk about another way to support energy, giving, and then kind of keeping everything else as it is. We were planning to follow up in 3 months, again, June, July, August, September. So to kind of get a sense before the next fall, winter season. And so here on the right, you'll see a panel that I am interested in looking at with folks that I now order through Rupa Health, that for some people, it actually helps with, sorry for a moment. Okay, so what I want to say here is that some people, you can bill these through insurance, and some people, they have a really high deductible, and that doing it through Rupa is actually cheaper for them. And so I like to talk through with my patients and give them all the options. And also for a lot of people, it's more affordable to go this route through Rupa. And then also when I have folks in a state where I'm have a different licensure, I can order through physician services, and that can be really helpful too. So here, I just want to go through the labs that I like to order before I pass it over to Lauren to go through how we actually integrate this and order it through Practice Better and through Rupa. So looking at CBC, we're going to want to look at indications of iron deficiency, indications of B12 or folate deficiency, and we'll look at that when I come back. Looking at the comprehensive metabolic panel, we're looking at, of course, kidney and liver function. We're also looking at blood sugar regulation. And then I love to look at copper in addition to zinc, which is here at the bottom, as also another marker. We mentioned zinc is very important for thyroid function, which is important for mood and metabolism, which were big concerns of Rachel in this case. So to look at those also in relationship to each other, looking at high sensitivity C-reactive protein as a marker of inflammation, which can also have a major impact on mental health, on brain fog, mental health, all these things. Looking at ferritin, that iron store, as a follow-up, because we already saw that she's low. Looking at hemoglobin A1C as a blood sugar marker. Homocysteine can be helpful to look at B12 deficiency and any sort of issue with methylation. Insulin for blood sugar as well. A lipid panel to make sure that not only is there not too much cholesterol, but also that there's enough to be able to be making adequate brain chemicals and hormones. And then looking at magnesium as another really important nutrient for brain health. A thyroid panel, which includes that free T3 and free T4. Vitamin D, we want to follow up on. In this case, we won't run antibodies again, but we already did for her. And so I'm going to pass it over to Lauren to now see how we integrate. Now that I have these labs that I would like to order for Rachel, she'll show us how to do it.
Thank you. That was so great. I feel like Rachel is a very relatable case study. So here on my screen is your Rupa Health homepage, where you can transparently see all of your patient orders. And you can also very quickly start an order for a patient. All that's needed to start an order on Rupa Health is going to be a first name, last name, and email. That's it. You don't have to worry about inputting any demographics, shipping, or payment information. That's something that Rupa is going to be able to take off the plate of the practitioner, because truly our goal is just to save y'all time so you can do what you do best, seeing patients and helping patients. So this is the order screen on Rupa. It's also going to look very similar. It's actually the exact same if you're ordering directly from your Practice Better platform, which I'll demo in a minute. But we're going to go ahead and use that awesome panel that our doctor built out for us today for the seasonal affective disorder. So this is our depression labs panel. There is a link that is going to be shared in the chat so that you can actually add this bundle to your personal Rupa Health account, and you can start ordering this for your patients today. So on Rupa, you have the ability to favorite individual tests, So not only do we have the ability for basic blood work panels to be built out, but you can also do all of your specialty lab testing on Rupa as well. So you can favorite tests, and then you can also bundle tests together, as well as create your own personal panels very easily, so you have quick access to add it to a shopping cart for a patient. We're going to go ahead and look at a couple of things over here in what I like to call our shopping carts. First off is going to be pricing. So on Rupa, all of the price you see in the catalog is the lowest wholesale practitioner price, and that's extended to your patients. So just as the doctor mentioned in the live class, sometimes it's actually less expensive for patients to get their blood work done through Rupa. These are going to be cash pay-based labs. As long as you're the ordering practitioner, you can always add ICD-10 codes so a patient can receive a super bill to submit for potential reimbursement. But really our goal is to make these as affordable as possible for patients without having to go through insurance. Another huge benefit to ordering through Rupa is the options that we give to patients for payment. So not only will they have the credit and debit cards available, they can also use an HSA or FSA card. And then an awesome option is our 3-month payment plan. So when practitioners come to me and they're like, my patients have a financial barrier to wanting to do lab testing, I tell them to let them know that the patient will have an option for a payment plan. It's 3 installments. There's no interest-free, and they don't have to pre-qualify for it. So that makes it a lot more approachable for patients by being able to offer the lab testing through Rupa. Now, the signing practitioner, and we did briefly mention it in the live class, Rupa does offer physician services available to add on to your account. And physician services is an awesome service that we allow health and wellness professionals to collaborate with a signing physician to be able to offer these tests to their clients. So you can use obviously your signing practitioner name, your medical license, but just know that you do have the ability for physician services if that's applicable to you, your practice, and your clients. You can see that when we added the panel, all individual biomarkers added very conveniently, and there is a $10 blood draw at LabCorp. So anytime you're ordering under the Access LabCorp Draw Lab Company in our platform, your patients are going to have that cost-effective and convenient option for ordering their labs. Just below, you do have the ability to add a custom fee, so you can think of this as your ability to charge for your time and service, but you can also completely remove that as well. Looking at the grand total, I'm going to just point out we do have a 7% Rupa service fee, and that's added to each order. If you'd like to handle the cost of this lab order on behalf of your patient, you can certainly do so. You can save your bank account, credit card info, and then we will not disclose any pricing to your patients. I mentioned the ICD-10 codes for insurance, so this is if you want patients to be able to have the ability to generate a super bill for reimbursement. And then last but not least, you can always add that patient's phone number. I always recommend doing so because that way we can actually text them so they're very aware that they just had a recent order placed for them. But once you have everything set up, favorites, bundles, or you're letting Rupa handle the payment, or you have your payment info saved, you can truly come into this ordering screen, place an order from any lab company in just under a couple of minutes. Then you can go ahead and click send. And this is when I tell practitioners, this is when Rupa takes the wheel, and then we'll hand you back the reins once those results come in. So truly handling everything here from billing, payment, collecting the sample, ensuring they're getting their blood draw scheduled and phlebotomy goes well, up until the point that the results come in. And then all of that will come back into your Practice Better patient record as well as your Rupa Health dashboard. So I'm going to go ahead and show y'all how you can set up this integration. It's very simple. And so what you'll do is you'll come into your settings, you'll go to clinic settings, and you're going to see the section that says here's an integration. You'll click Add Integration, and you'll see the Practice Better logo pop up with a button to click Connect. Now, I'm already connected, and to ensure your connection has been set up, you'll just go ahead and toggle on, or this will automatically be toggled on once you're successfully connected to order and receive all of the results in the Labs tab within your Practice Better EHR. Now, I'm going to go ahead and navigate on over to our Practice Better platform, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to place this order directly from the client profile in your patient Practice Better EHR. So you'll come and you'll find your clients, and then you'll see the tab where it says Labs. And from here, you'll be able to transparently see all of the labs that you have previously ordered for that client. You can also view the results here. Now, to go ahead and create an order, you'll just go ahead and click this plus button, and then you'll click Create a Rupa Order, And then it's going to ask me to continue on to the Rupa dashboard. It's simply just going to give you a pop-up window of the ordering screen that I just demoed over on our Rupa Health platform. Otherwise, that's how you place an order on Practice Better and how the ordering process works on Rupa Health.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. That's really helpful. So we did all that. We sent out the order and we received it back, and now we're ready to take a look. I want to emphasize what Lauren said about Rachel being so relatable, because she did not come back in 3 months. She came back after it was already a year, because that happens. She was feeling better and she was kind of busy, so she didn't check in earlier, which is totally fine. But she did want to come back. So this is since that initial visit. And she wanted to just kind of check in. Her baseline energy was much higher. She experienced lower energies at time, and it felt kind of random. And she was kind of wondering still about this question about thyroid support as well. Her mornings were kind of hard. She was still taking tyrosine. It didn't feel like she needed coffee, but she wanted it, which makes so much sense. And then she said that she'd noticed a difference in energy and mood if she had been traveling, for example, and wasn't taking her supplements. So she definitely saw a difference there. So here is her new mood symptoms. So from that initial visit to at 12 weeks to 1 year, the serotonin symptoms were still 0. So she was still feeling really good. The catecholamine symptoms, so the dopamine symptoms, were still kind of about what they were a year ago. They were 12 this time and maybe 14 a year ago. Here are the follow-up labs. So here's that panel that we took a look at and to see how she's doing. So we looked at her complete blood count. The thing I wanted to note here is that her MCV had been 85 and then now is 91. So there was some change there. Sometimes when I see this MCV, it's the mean corpuscular volume increase. It might indicate a B12 or folate deficiency. And so we're going to take another look there. Her fasting glucose had gone up a little bit, about the same as it was, 89, 91. There's a variability there. Her TSH, though, went up way, way higher. So it's at 6.12, where it had been at 2.6. And then her free T4, free T3, though, were still in a pretty normal range. And so we'll note on this in a moment of what this could mean. And then her hemoglobin A1C, that 3-month average of blood sugar, also was kind of creeping up a little bit here now at 5.6. Her vitamin D was better, but still not in our optimal range. And her ferritin was doing a lot better. So her iron deficiency anemia was no longer present here. We had done a few additional lab tests. So we looked at her vitamin B12, which is still, it's in the lower end of our optimal range. So we're still kind of wondering about that, especially with the p-value. Her folate again, also is within an optimal range, but maybe on the lower end of it. Zinc was a little bit low here, optimal being 99. The copper was in lower end of a normal range. The ratio between them, though, looked okay. They weren't too far apart. Her magnesium, red blood cell magnesium, was low here in the optimal range. Her CRP, which is the inflammation marker, was a little bit high here. So it was at 4.46. So we like to see it under 1. And even conventionally, the CRP, they like to see it under 3. So we're still kind of curious about some of these factors that could be underlying how she's feeling with her energy and, a little bit of what may predispose her to feeling down in the winter. Her homocysteine was at 7.2, which is within the normal range. So looks like the methylation, it looks okay. And then insulin, fasting insulin was a bit elevated. It's within conventional range, but in this looking at optimal range, we're seeing maybe there's an issue with insulin sensitivity. And so I wanted to just make a note here that sometimes we can see for people who are having mental health issues that it can be an issue of insulin resistance as contributing to it. Sometimes the up and down can affect mood as well. So I just wanted to point out this measure, the HOMA-IR score. For her score is 2.9, which sometimes some studies say that above 2 can indicate insulin resistance. Again, you'll have all these slides for reference. And so I was kind of curious for her what the results of her thyroid tests were, that her TSH was quite high, whereas her thyroid hormones were in the normal range. And so this has a diagnosis called subclinical hypothyroidism. And then I was curious about how that might relate to what we're seeing with her inflammation and with insulin. And this study does link those together, saying that subclinical hypothyroidism can increase insulin resistance in people who have normal blood glucose levels. So this is an area that seems to be a spot to continue with her when we're looking at root causes of what could be contributing to her overall symptom picture. And so new recommendations for Rachel in this new time. So she actually came in very interested she had been doing her own research online, and she was interested in trying some extra thyroid support. And she mentioned that she saw me not for primary care or anything. And so she says that her healthcare is a little bit spotty. This might be also relatable to people who feel like their insurance keeps changing all the time. And so she wanted to be able to have something that wouldn't need to be prescribed. So I supported her on this as long as we were going to recheck her thyroid. I looked into it as well. So she started to take a non-prescription desiccated thyroid capsule as opposed to like one of the prescription ones. So otherwise keeping things similar. And then the plan would be to recheck in another 3 months. And so I'm going to leave it here. We did check in after a week, and she was kind of cautiously optimistic that this thyroid support was a key factor for her and how she was feeling. And so I want to speak just for a moment about how this relates to seasonal affective disorder and kind of what we can look at. I really appreciated seeing in the chat all the different places that people were coming in from, because at least here where I am in Philadelphia, the winter, you're definitely starting to feel that in these months that people are at higher risk of having seasonal affective disorder. And we'll talk a little bit more about that now. So possible risk factors can be a family history of mental health conditions like depression or schizophrenia, a personal mental health history. We saw with Rachel that while she never had a diagnosis, that she did have periods where she was feeling down, especially in response to big stressors. We find that people who are female tend to have more risk factor for seasonal affective disorder, living at more northern latitude. So this is where the folks are coming in from Florida might not see this as much as people here, or when I was, living over in Seattle, seeing it more often. And we're also seeing it more in that young adult age, 18 to 30. And then possible causes. This is what I find is really interesting. So there's so basically serotonin levels can decrease due to the shorter daylight hours. We also see that vitamin D deficiency is increasing because of less exposure to sunlight. And we'll talk a little bit more of that, even if you are exposed to sunlight in this time of year, that we're not necessarily getting what we need to make our own vitamin D. Vitamin D also is important for serotonin synthesis. We also might see increased melatonin, which can account for why people get maybe more sleepy when it comes to seasonal affective disorder. And that could, in response to more darkness. And then that could also compete for the precursors to make serotonin. And I had to look at this up myself, but to remind myself that the melatonin is made in the pineal gland, which is outside the central nervous system. And so it's competing in two different places. And so looking at where are you in the world, this is the sunshine calendar. And so, if people are living above about 33 degrees north are not able to synthesize vitamin D in the winter. If you look here, just to give you the example of Philadelphia, where I am, in November, December, January, February, we're just not able to, even if we are out in the sunlight, we're not making it. And then sometimes it also depends on skin tone. So for example, if there's low sunshine in some of these areas, if it takes 30 minutes to get enough sun for people who are light-skinned, and for people who are dark-skinned, it takes 90 minutes. So you might see more vitamin D deficiency in folks with darker skin as well. It's important to note in your practice for your patients. So some conventional approaches to seasonal affective disorder. One that's been really well studied, and I recommend this as well, is light therapy, making sure it's 10,000 lux every day for about 30 to 45 minutes, usually first thing in the morning from fall to spring. So this can really make a difference for people in their mood this time of year. Psychotherapy, especially cognitive behavioral therapy, and behavioral activation, which behavioral activation is kind of giving people, you can look this up on your own, but giving people small tasks to do that help them, they know can be helpful for their mood. Also, people sometimes are prescribed antidepressant medication, and sometimes conventionally they'll look at vitamin D, but not always. Antidepressant medication, of course, is also acting on serotonin pathways. And so if we're taking those recommendations, plus we're bringing this integrative approach like we've been doing with Rachel about noting, are there nutrient deficiencies like iron or vitamin D or other vitamins or minerals, cofactors, amino acids that will create neurotransmitters, or their hormone imbalances, that it's just a hypothyroidism, that are also underlying how how people are going to be able to fare in the darker months. And so kind of just summing up Rachel's case here, she had kind of the stress-induced symptoms of a depressed mood. It was a response to a big breakup. I didn't mention, but she had a stressful job. She is continuing to meet with a therapist. So she is getting that approach. She had iron deficiency without anemia. We saw that was very clear. And so she was finding improvement to her energy levels. As we know, that can be a diagnosis of depression, is fatigue. So we're trying to bring her out of that. Her ability to exercise increased. Vitamin D deficiency, she was slowly being able to replete vitamin D. However, we still have questions, and a future case study might be of how well is she actually absorbing vitamin D if she's not continuing to improve with the supplements. We were thinking borderline B12 deficiency, so we're keeping an eye on that. And then this subclinical hypothyroidism could be affecting perhaps insulin resistance, blood glucose and inflammation. Seeing some improvement, and we're going to continue to monitor this. And so that's the presentation, just to see that we have a lot of tools at our disposal to do true preventive medicine. So in our practices, to prevent our clients who are especially high at risk from developing seasonal affective disorder this very fall and winter. So I hope that this was helpful.
Welcome to Rupa Health, the best place to order, manage, and track results from over 30 different lab companies in one single place for free. It's going to take you under 2 minutes to sign up, and you can order any functional medicine lab for your client in under 30 seconds. Let me show you how it's done. So here's our beautiful interface. I'm typing in the name of my client, selecting the lab that I want to order for them, and hitting send. From there, Rupa and their amazing team handle the rest. They email the client, collect payment, and even offer an interest-free 3-month payment plan. We've also built the world's largest library of information about chronic health conditions, the lab tests that can help you find the root cause, and the evidence-based interventions that you can use to help people heal from them. It's called the Rupa Health Magazine. There, we have in-depth articles about almost any health condition you can imagine. And we give you step-by-step protocols that other clinicians have used to help their clients heal and that are verified by evidence-based sources. You should totally check it out, and it'll transform your practice. And we can't wait to see you. So make sure you sign up today at rupahealth.com.